Merry Christmas Eve, bitch. Welcome to the Sleepless Cinematic Podcast, where we explore our shared love for watching and discussing movies recorded in the late after-work hours, often in lieu of a good night's rest. I'm Emilio.
I'm Madeline.
And I'm Julian. The three of us are colleagues at a Midtown Manhattan music school. Yes, music is what brings us together, but movies are what keep us together talking at the end of the night. So we've created some order to this ongoing trend by recording these conversations, considering an overarching theme while we cycle through 5 unique guidelines for engagement.
You can email us at sleeplesscinematicpod@gmail.com. Seriously, we would love to hear from you. You can follow us on Instagram and TikTok for updates, highlights, clips, and other visual supplements to the audio we record at Sleepless Cinematic Pod.
In addition to these main episodes, we also record and release bonus one-off episodes as we see fit. And while we do this, you, the listener, can count on the three of us doing what we've grown to love, foregoing sleep for a discussion about movies every other week.
And this week, we wrap up our current cycle of unorthodox holiday movies. In keeping with last year's conceit, each entry in this cycle will be a suggestion box episode.
Gift box,
thank you. Where one of us elects a film for the group to discuss. At least one of us will be seeing this movie for the first time, and differing opinions may or may not be held among us.
And much like last year, I get to go last.
You do.
We also did mine third last year. And this year, my choice is Tangerine, Sean Baker's film from 2015. I'm very excited to talk about this film. This is his 5th feature, but it was certainly the first one that I had seen. And I think one that really catapulted him to a totally new place in the public eye. Starring Katana Kiki Rodriguez and Maya Taylor, along with Sean Baker, regular, I'm going to mispronounce this, Karen Karagulian.
That was pretty good.
That was pretty good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm excited to talk about this movie too.
Same.
Yeah, and we're delighted to welcome today's guest to the table, a native New Yorker whose work in film exhibition is really second to none here in the city. In the 2010s, he worked as a projectionist at the Maysles Documentary Center and transitioned into a curatorial role there, as well as at the Museum of the Moving Image. He writes about movies for the Reverse Shot, Momi's online publication dedicated to providing cinephiles a, quote, different angle on the moving image, past, present, and future. He is currently the film programmer at Metrograph, a revival theater with impeccable taste that is near and dear to our hearts on this podcast. It is such a treat to have him here. Choi, welcome to the Sleepless Cinematic Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You are very welcome. How's everything lining up, by the way, for the holidays for you? It's a time of the year you look forward to, or?
Yeah, definitely. It's a time of year where we try to have as few live guests as possible and just play movies.
Nice.
Very cool.
So it's actually a pretty good period for us in terms of having a little bit more time to look ahead.
Very nice.
Cool.
Nice.
And maybe a little bit of time to do something like this. I don't know. Is this the kind of thing you would do normally?
Just comes with the territory.
Well, you know what? We're very grateful to you for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was just at Metrograph over the weekend for the book sale. I was very excited to find a book for my dad.
What was the book?
My brain went empty. It was a Laurel and Hardy book.
Okay.
He's a big Laurel and Hardy fan. I think I've mentioned on this podcast about I once went on a road trip with my parents. I fell asleep somewhere in Alabama and woke up in, I think, Mississippi at the Museum of Laurel and Hardy.
Okay.
So I think he'll really appreciate this book.
Yeah, no, I didn't make it to that book sale, but I was tangentially aware of it because I was down at the Metrograph just yesterday, as of this recording.
Wow.
To see a movie, to see Eat, Drink, Man, Woman.
I'm so glad you got around to that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's my first time seeing it. I was very impressed by the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like we've given lip service to it in past episodes here that, that theater is a place we all really enjoy going. In fact, I mean, one experience that we've all had together there was watching the Oscars there in 2024.
Funny enough, the three of us have never gone to see a movie together. It's
That's
hard.
true.
It's hard to actually arrange our schedules to watch movies at the same time.
Yeah.
But the one time we did all go somewhere and watch something, it was to Metrograph to watch the Oscars.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was the year before the big sweep that occurred by the director of the film we're discussing tonight,
That's
Tangerine.
True. Yeah, maybe it would have worked better if we had gone last year.
I was still there
You
for that
went,
one.
yes,
I
you
did
did
go.
go.
No.
Yeah, no, it's been a fixture for me for the last few years because, I mean, in just experiencing the Oscars with an audience, it's something that if you're into that sort of thing, you don't get tired of it. So I'm, grateful year after year to the Metrograph for providing that opportunity. Well, now we'll get into discussing the film itself, Tangerine. But, before we actually get into this movie specifically, we should clarify that it's not to be confused with other titles, maybe of other movies that take place in Los Angeles in periods of under 24 hours and are named after something emerging from a plant like Magnolia.
Oh, great point.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that, but emerging from a plant is a great way to get in on this.
Yes.
And also, isn't this a Magnolia Pictures production?
This is,
Hey,
for the reason. Yeah. So, yeah, Magnolia, the Paul Thomas Anderson movie from 1999, not to be confused with Tangerine.
Yeah.
And of course, although one of our leads, Cindy, is emerging back into the public after spending 28 days in jail, this film is not to be confused with 28 Days Later.
Yeah.
Very good. Extremely different films. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And after emerging from being incarcerated, hopping mad for almost this entire movie with plans of making someone feel the full extent of her fury. Despite that being the case, this is not to be confused with Grapes of Wrath, the 1940 film starring Henry Fonda. That is an adaptation of the John Steinbeck novel. Which also takes place in California, I should say.
That is true.
No, they are different films. And while this is also a fruit-based title, notably centered in California, this is not to be confused with Orange County.
Yeah, that's true.
The 2002 comedy starring Colin Hanks and Jack Black about trying to get into Stanford University. Have you guys seen this movie?
No.
No. I don't think so.
Have you seen this movie, Edo?
I have not.
Not programmed with that one. Sorry.
Fair enough. This is not a particularly good movie.
That's why we haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Which itself is not to be confused with the OC.
That's very true.
That's true.
Yeah.
But along somewhat similar lines, Tangerine, being a movie that is set in under 24 hours in Los Angeles, following two young women facing the precariousness relating to their line of work. This is also not to be confused with One of Them Days.
Right.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Good,
which is
good poll.
a movie that came out almost a year ago as of this recording that I think was a little bit under discussed at the time of coming out, but I think now that year-end lists are emerging that it's getting some of its due.
Yeah, also like a female friendship movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Female
like
friendship movie, and also like just a great example of like a modern studio comedy that really I saw it. It hits on a lot of levels. It's the kind of movie that I think that a lot of people wish was around more, and well, it is. It's not all the way gone the way that a lot of people would assume.
Cool. I like that. Well, Madeline, what is Tangerine about?
Good question. It's Christmas Eve. And actually, if you're listening to this the day it drops, it is Christmas Eve. Happy Christmas Eve. But in this film, it's Christmas Eve in sunny LA. And so it looks a little different from your typical holiday film. Rather than just celebrating Christmas, our two lovely leads, Cindy and Alexandra, are celebrating Cindy's release from prison. Cindy may also have something else to celebrate, but just as she's about to break some exciting news to her friend, Alexandra informs her that Cindy's boyfriend and pimp Chester has been canoodling with another woman. So sets Cindy on her mission to track down this mysterious D-named woman and make Chester answer for his infidelity. While she scours the city, Alexandra takes to her normal block to both make some Christmas Eve cash and invite her friends, and sometimes even John's, to her performance at a local club that very evening. One of these Johns becomes pretty central in our story. Rosmic, an Armenian cab driver, has a particular preference among the sex workers that he solicits, and both Alexandra and Cindy fit this bill. Our three leads spend the daytime on their separate journeys, but it seems as though their paths may all converge later in the night. Maybe at Alexandra's anticipated performance, but perhaps a more explosive confrontation is brewing at a local spot known as Donut Time.
I love Donut Time, by the way. I was reading that Sean Baker literally said, if we can't film in Donut Time, I don't want to make this movie.
My friend Mark went, and he loves to visit film locations in any city he's visiting. And so he did have to seek out Donut Time specifically when he was in LA. I think they have since closed.
I have heard this too. I think it actually closed pretty recently after this film was filmed. Yeah. So it's a bummer. Rest in peace, Donut Time, but definitely preserved to great effect in this film. I am the one who was seeing it for the first time.
Yeah.
Gotta say, I was pretty blown away by this movie. I loved the simplicity of the story. I loved the directness in which it's told. I think the two leads in this movie are out of this world.
Yeah.
Like borderline
They're
revelations.
very captivating.
Absolutely. I'll get into maybe more specifics as we keep moving through this, but like the look of the film was really cool.
Yeah.
I think this movie also rode this wonderful line of being very funny, but also there being very serious themes just below the surface.
Yeah.
I think a lot to chew on. And I'm very excited to talk about this movie. And I'm very, very grateful to have received this as a suggestion.
Yeah, I'm very glad that you are appreciating the suggestion. Edo, had you seen this film before? What's your connection to Tangerine? Actually, no.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So we're half and half here.
I'm
That's
grateful
very nice.
for the invite because it made me plug that hole.
Nice.
Excellent. I'm
That's
glad to hear
awesome. Had you known anything about this movie before?
Oh, I remember when it came out.
Yeah.
I remember when it premiered at the Sundance Film Festival. I remember what a sensation it was that year critically. Just never got around to it.
that. That happens.
Yeah. And I didn't get around to it that year, but I had seen this movie before. It was about 5.5 years before this recording. It was not the first Sean Baker movie that I watched. That was The Florida Project.
Yeah.
Which I also didn't see when it came out. I just kind of let that wait until, I was in college at the time it came out. I was pretty busy, so I let it wait until after I had graduated. And The Florida Project blew me away like from start to finish. I was very impressed by that movie. I figured I was going to like Tangerine as well, which I did. I watched that about a year later. This was a quarantine watch for me. June of 2020 was when I first saw it. And I remember the feeling of watching it being a little bit like the last time we talked about a Sean Baker movie, it was Anora, and we paired that with the Safdie brothers movie Good Time. And I remembered the experience of watching Tangerine the first time being a little bit viscerally what it is like to watch a Safdie brothers movie, where I think by the end of it, I just felt kind of like, whoa, okay.
I had to take a deep breath.
Yeah, I was winded. But honestly, there was I remember feeling like from the first few scenes, like kind of winded already, just because of like the pace at which the story moves. Like it's in the first few seconds that you already, like the inciting incident happens.
Yeah, it drops you right in.
Yeah. And I also feel like one of the things I love just on a visceral level with this movie is the soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
For whatever reason, I wasn't ready for this movie to sound the way that it does.
And it has a pretty wide range in the soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
It does, yeah. There's something about that I think too feeds right into the atmosphere that you're talking about, Julian, which is there's a lot of intensity coming at you.
Yeah.
I think it kind of drops you into what these characters are feeling. There's a urgency, I think, that for whatever reason these characters are feeling, and the music is right there to support that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is my suggestion, so I've definitely seen this before. I saw Florida Project, I think, in theaters, and I believe that I watched this for the first time kind of leading up to that. Because I think my partner, we called Dougie on this podcast, I feel like maybe he had seen this before and was like, oh, we should watch this before we go see Florida Project. That's my recollection. That could be slightly wrong, but I feel like that's the general timeline. Is I do think I saw this first, and then I saw Florida Project in the theaters. But I don't think I've watched this since then. It's funny what I remembered, and then what I felt like I was almost experiencing for the first time. And one thing that I found interesting is so much in my memory. The scene that stuck with me is Alexandra's performance. That's what I always kind of come back to.
We are a table of musicians.
Yeah. That is
there
true.
You go.
And I'm sure that we have all been to a point of like, hey, I've got this gig. Here's a flyer.
100%.
All my friends are going to be at this gig.
Even pay to play. Have you guys ever done pay to play?
I haven't, but I have done the like ticket minimum. Like you don't start making money until you sell 10, 15 tickets or whatever.
Pay to play is a tough slot. I'm happy to say that it's been a long time since I've done that. So there
moved on from that. Part of your life.
But I got like some sense, like, memories coming back, seeing that unfold.
Yeah, I have not done pay to play, so luckily I don't have like trauma associated with that.
Not yet.
Oh yeah.
Just wait, Julian.
That performance scene was one from the first viewing that really stuck with me as well. Yeah, I think that like more to like that point onward in the story, I remembered a lot of what I saw. It was more in like the kind of slice of life flow of it beforehand that I had to be reminded of some things.
Yeah.
Like even something as, you would think memorable as the service that occurs during the car wash.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I actually didn't remember from the first time.
Yeah.
But especially like post Anora and with, so many eyes on the Sean Baker filmography. I mean, this was really illuminating to come back to, because when I first saw this movie, like I hadn't like, someone like Karan Karagulian, who's very prominent in this movie, I hadn't really remembered what he looked like yet. He's in all of Sean Baker's movies. I don't really remember his presence in the Florida Project at all. I think it's pretty small.
Yeah.
But it's sort of like, especially after seeing Anora and then, getting more used to the presence of him and some of the other regular Sean Baker players who also appear in this film. I mean, it's really, in retrospect, you can see a lot of the seeds here to what would become Anora. And then also, because of the acclaim that film has gotten, that you can go even earlier in the Sean Baker filmography.
Yeah.
There's, the only film of his I haven't seen by now is 4 Letter Words, his very first movie, which is pretty hard to get. But
I think that's one that he is not upset at you for not having seen that. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think he's like disowned it, but I think he was like, that's when I was telling stories about my own experience. And then
Right.
I found it a lot more interesting to tell stories about experiences that were different than mine.
Sure.
yeah.
Which I'd love to come back to. I think it's an interesting angle into talking about Tangerine.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
But then, this year on Criterion Channel, they have consistently been showing the 3 movies that led up to Tangerine, following 4 Letter Words, which are Takeout, Prince of Broadway, and Starlet, which are all like fascinating to see, especially if you know what his career has become.
Absolutely. I also feel like there is a wonderful through line, I think, because I've seen bits and pieces of Prince of Broadway too.
Yeah.
I think you can just really track his progression and also see that this is a guy that I think has always had this kind of vision as a filmmaker. He's always been fascinated with telling these kinds of stories and coming at them from a very DIY type of place. And so, I love how in many ways Tangerine, at least from my kind of limited exposure to his filmography, feels a little bit like a culmination of a lot of the things that he was building up for the decade plus before.
Yeah.
Totally.
Edo, what were your kind of initial reactions to Tangerine?
It was nice to see, because I'm used to the last 3 films he's made and the aesthetic of those films, which is a little bit more normalized.
Yeah.
For a more mainstream audience. And the thing that is exciting about Tangerine is the fact that he shot it on an iPhone.
Yeah.
Totally.
And there's a limitation to the image that the iPhone generates. And that you can capture with it, it's always clipping in the highlights,
Right.
and there's things that they can't do with focal length. So it's basically just all in wide angle, so there's always like an extreme depth of field. You can see everything in the background, so they have to play with those limitations, and that makes him more inventive than in the later films, I think, visually. And he tries to do things to just enliven the rhythm of the film, because he knows that he can't give you like a really nice single shot sequence. So instead, what he'll do is he'll cut to like an odd angle, and he'll throw, or maybe he'll throw 3 or 4 different angles at you within, like when they're walking down the street, he'll make the walk more kinetic and give it a little bit more velocity just by these by the propulsion of the cuts, and that was exciting. I mean, it's actually a little bit more experimental in its approach. The sequence in the car wash is really interesting, because the way that he uses the music, this kind of SoundCloud EDM thing, over what's happening.
The sounds of the car wash.
It actually gives it a kind of sense of the sublime. It becomes really a sort of poetic sequence, which is not, there isn't anything like that in the later film. From Florida Project forward, they're much more kind of straightforward narrative films. They still have a poppy aesthetic, but but it's a little bit more kind of tame.
Yeah, definitely.
I love that you brought up this scene because I think this is one of the maybe 2 or 3 scenes that really stuck with me. There's a kind of a content reason, I think, also where this jumps out. But to me, one of the things that I loved about that, as you're going through the car wash with these 2 people, there is a sense, I feel, that the car is not getting cleaned at all. Like, I don't know, I found very funny to me.
Yeah.
I think there is a little bit of a parallel with some of the action that's happening there in the car, that there's something, a little kind of dirty, a little transgressive in some respects. But I love that about that scene. And I think it ties in really nicely to the visual presentation.
But also the sense that, like, on both sides of that situation, that these are routine services.
Right.
Yeah.
That, for the people at the car wash, this is just another job. And that, well, I mean, for Alexandra, giving providing her service to Razmik, this is just another job too.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think Maya Taylor was the one that said to Sean Baker, like, I know people that do this because you get this like uninterrupted 5 minutes. That's like way cheaper than a motel room.
Yeah. Yeah. So. I mean, the attention to detail on that, I think is really, to me, it was funny. It was like, in the past couple of years, have grown to love car washes because I have a 6-year-old son that is just
kids love car washes. I loved car washes
by car washes. And so it was very funny to me because I have similarly started to look at car washes through the eyes of a young child. And so it was very funny for me to sort of see this juxtaposition on film. Totally. The way I thought about it in my head is that Tangerine does to car washes what Fargo did to wood chippers. Yeah. That, like, there's just, I never am going to look at them
look at a car wash the same
way.
Never know what's happening in the car in front of you in the car wash.
That's a good point.
And Sean Baker said he had always wanted to film a scene in a car wash.
Oh, cool.
and so when he hears this story, he's like, well, got to put that in. That's the way I'm finally going to film my car wash scene.
It's great, though. It's kind of a standout moment in this movie, I think.
Yeah.
For vibe and everything.
There are a number of things that this movie was kind of instantly iconic for, whether it be the car wash or, I mean, also what it did for trans representation.
Absolutely.
It was certainly a milestone in trans actors on film in 2015. But also, just as being, like, for a while, the movie that was shot on an iPhone.
Right. Yeah.
And we, like, Edo, you already kind of brought us into this, but I think that it's a good place to get into deeper discussion with, because so, I mean, I think that maybe that was the first thing I ever heard about Tangerine years ago, was that this movie was shot on an iPhone, and then it has this kind of cachet from that. But then the first time I watched it 5.5 years ago, I didn't think very much about the iPhone being present, which is partially just because of, not being a little less adept to the details that emerge from something like that as they are happening. But I think that I was able to, if you call it suspension of disbelief, it was whatever that was, with forgetting that it was an iPhone while watching. Coming back to it this time, though, I was very aware of it, not just because of my heightened attention to detail, largely from doing this podcast, but just I could really see the touches and the way I don't say this in a critical way, the seams that emerge with that means of production while watching it. And so, like, what additional thoughts do we have on the iPhone-based visual style of this film? Like, what scenes are you most aware of it during? What effect do you think it has?
Well, I mean, in the performance sequence, there's all these cutaways to the other characters watching her sing. Yeah. And there's this one shot of Dinah and Kiki's character.
Cindy.
Cindy. As they're kind of in this lounge seat or kind of sofa.
Yeah, it's like
and Cindy's in the foreground and Dinah is in the background, but because it's this extreme wide angle with the adapted, they use this anamorphic adapter for the iPhone lens. It creates like this extreme sense of depth. So it feels like Dinah is much further away than she really is. So these shifts in scale are within the image are really dynamic.
Yeah.
and he really plays with that. There's another sequence earlier in the film where Cindy is waiting at a bus stop, and he films it almost like a Sergio Leone sequence. And in fact, from what I read before coming here tonight, Baker cited Leone when he was talking about how they were going to use the anamorphic frame, when he was trying to convince this company to give them the anamorphic adapters for like a lower rate, so that because it would be promotional.
Sure.
And he really does do that. She's sitting at this bus stop, and in the background you can see a chemtrail of some plane, and it fills the whole width of the frame behind her.
Right.
And then when it cuts to the reverse angle and the bus drives into the frame in the background behind her, the ad on the bus lands like in the perfect spot.
Yeah.
Right, like right next to her, and then the door is right behind her, and then you can see all the people through the windows of the bus. He really uses that. And it just creates this wonderful visual field there's always something to look at. He's really using the fact that he's restricted to actually make something that's more visually rich and delightful than I've seen from him. And that makes it less of just a kind of linear experience. So there's no reason for that bus stop sequence to be as mesmerizing as it is. And he can spin these sequences out of just these more kind of vertical moments of visual poetry, that's not like what he's doing now, because he can shoot on film, he can afford to shoot on film, he can afford to have the time and script development, and he can afford real scores. One of the things that's exciting about this film is, as you all mentioned at the outset, is the soundtrack, because the soundtrack is so startling. Every time there's a new needle drop, it pushes the movie forward.
It's almost always synced with like motion.
Exactly. So it's surprising, and now he tries to do the same effects, but he's like using a Britney Spears song, in Red Rocket, or he's using, but with these SoundCloud artists, I don't know what any of this stuff is, and it's a little bit more like Godard or like Dogma 95. It has that gathering of elements from the world and then turning them into the components of a composition. And I think that makes it less just what the story is about.
Yeah.
I like that. It's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. And I mean, I've noticed too that like, I think this is probably the Sean Baker movie where music is most abundant. I've always, like, ever since the Florida Project, felt very attuned, pun intended, to the use of music in his movies, but in the Florida Project, it's almost for the opposite reason, because it's very sparse in that movie. And that movie does a thing you see a lot in a lot of new Hollywood cinema, where there's kind of just one song that keeps being the focal point of the soundtrack.
A la House.
Yeah.
Which we recently spoke about.
Yeah. Or like a Midnight Cowboy.
More in the vein of like Midnight Cowboy or Harold and Maude, something like that.
Great.
As opposed, I mean, House, I mean, you're not wrong, but it's a different vibe, significantly. But
I say that full well, accepting that I have not seen the Florida Project yet. But the way you were describing it to me just was bringing back our conversation.
No, that's totally fair.
Yeah.
And then I started, like, since Tangerine, I actually think one way that with Honora, Sean Baker has come the closest that he has to Tangerine since that movie is in the use of music. That it's like, it feels, it's not as abundant. Like, I feel the silences very, like, I'm very conscious of the silences in that movie too, but I think that the needle drops, when they do happen, have a little more of the bombast of Tangerine.
Yeah.
And that also, in like, there's a lot of diegetic music in Honora as well.
Sure.
And sometimes in Tangerine, I think, I mean, you call it non-diegetic, but it honestly feels a little blurry.
No, I like that as a way of describing it. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks. But then going back to the visual style of the film, I mean, I think I was listening in preparation to this an episode of the Film Spotting podcast.
Love them, yeah.
Where they were commemorating Tangerine, this being the year of its 10th anniversary, and talking about how compared to like pretty much all of the Sean Baker films that preceded, this is a much more vibrant visual experience. That like take out Prince of Broadway. Those are pretty muted movies in terms of their color palettes. And I mean, part of that feels just like, pure naturalism, but also that in Starlit, which is closer to Tangerine, that movie, like you start to see a little more of like the patterns, both like visually and also in terms of narrative that emerge in some of his later films. They kind of become codified there.
Like jump cuts and stuff. I feel like you see that quite a bit happen in Starlit.
Jump cuts, like the use of music, and I mean, even some aspects of the arc of the story too. And even that feels a little muted by comparison to Tangerine. Then when it comes back to the iPhone, I think that I bookmarked that bus stop scene as well as one of like the moments when I really noticed the iPhone. And, for all of the reasons that you pointed out, Edo, but also that it is I just felt hyper conscious watching at this time of any time there was like a shot and reverse shot using the iPhone. I felt very aware of it in a way that I wouldn't be with a lot of, more conventional cinematic equipment. I think that like the effect that registered to me of seeing all this footage shot on an iPhone, I mean, it made me think about about what it's like to just kind of see things not meant for the big screen on an iPhone, and that there's kind of a fleetingness that it really that I associate with the visual style of an iPhone. That it's like when I see movies that are when I see footage that was clearly shot on a phone, I don't think of it. Feel like there's something that feels almost impermanent about it. Like it's not meant to capture all the time a seismic moment. It's meant to capture something mundane. And I mean, the fact of the matter is that in the world we live in, phones have, started revolutions. That, there have been seismic moments captured on phone footage, but I think they have an access to a mundanity that we don't often associate with typical cameras.
One of the things also that jumps out to me when we think about iPhones is, so this is 2015 when this was released. So 2014, 2015, probably when it's filmed. By that point, we're already as a society used to the idea of having a camera in our pockets. That's kind of, you used the word seismic before. That's kind of a seismic thing that happened to society.
Yeah.
But to me, the iPhone also has this feeling of voyeurism.
Yeah.
That I think is kind of interesting when we consider who the subjects in this movie are. Also, the provenance of this film is sort of tied, I think, a little bit to some of that. And so there is something kind of special. Like I think when I think about the ways that the iPhone, I think, really captures something is that moment when Dinah is taken from that hotel room.
Yeah.
There is just something very stark about what's being captured there. To me, that was actually when I felt the iPhone the most, is I'm like, whoa, we are getting into some pretty specific,
because this does just feel like something like an event that somebody would capture on the street when they're seeing something crazy like this happen,
or somebody being like, oh my god, this crazy person is in here trying to take somebody, let me just turn my phone on and capture this. And so there is an immediacy to it that I think Edo, to some of what you were saying before, is kind of unique and I think brings you in as a viewer.
I mean, I think it gives you the impression of that, but I would like push back slightly on the idea that this sensation of immediacy. I mean, we associate iPhone images with a certain disposability, let's say, because we all have them, and there's a certain ease with which we can just take it out and record. But if you take Steven Soderbergh's High Flying Bird, that's shot on an iPhone, and it doesn't have any of these qualities.
That's true.
That's true. Yeah, from what I've seen of it,
that's a very it looks like a professional film, and the way that he's using the camera. So it's more about how Baker's using the camera. What he's kind of leaning into some of the these qualities that it affords you. So, and there are movies shot on much more expensive cameras that they're also kind of pushing the same aesthetic. So, like think about like Michael Mann's Miami Vice, like that's shot on
digital,
what were at the time state of the art high def cameras. So it's the imagery produced by the camera has certain valences and then some certain cultural associations attached to it, but it's also about how he's accentuating them, like in the way he's actually inflecting the image, right? What he's the choices he's making. So like that scene where she's pulled out of the motel room, that's upsetting because it's just staged in such a frenetic way, and we know the location is real, and all the locations are real. Same with the sequence at the climactic sequence at the donut shop, like that feels so chaotic because it is staged in this donut shop, and the image is this wide angle image where we can when there's that great moment where he cuts in a shot, he insinuates this shot very briefly of them yelling at each other through the donut case. And he's just doing that all, and then he cuts out as if we were looking, if we were a bystander or like a passerby looking through the window, like seeing
like
this
on the
unfold.
sidewalk.
So it's like the mode of perception is simulating that of something happened upon. I guess what I mean is it's not that it's the iPhone, it's the way that he's leaning into certain things that we associate with it.
I like that point a lot because, Sean Baker, when he talks about like his decision to film this on iPhones, he talks about how he can't really ask the favors of getting like borrowing fancy equipment and fancy cameras. He doesn't really have the money to rent them or buy them. But then when he is like, we could have used DSLRs, but like when it occurred to him that he could do this on phones because of the innovations that people are finding at this time, particularly on Vimeo, apparently, of like trying to figure out how they could make full films with an iPhone. He was like, I want it to look different. So he's not trying to take an iPhone and make it look like a traditional film. Because if he wanted it to look like that, he would have used DSLRs, which are, obviously not the quality of previous or subsequent films of his, technically, but would still give more of a traditional film look. Yeah. But he wants it to look different. He wants it to feel grittier and more colorful, et cetera.
And the anamorphic that's nothing, that we don't associate that at all with our phones.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's a very cinematic frame. And there's even some shots that simulate like crane shots, like he probably used a drone or something like that.
Yeah, I was curious about that.
And there's some very odd camera movements that were probably executed using a gimbal or something, devices of that nature.
Sure.
So there are, it's a very like erudite move. It's a movie made by someone who knows about how movies have been made in the past. I mean, this is why I found it so interesting that he cited Leone, because Leone was making westerns,
right?
But the way that he's filming the streets of downtown Los Angeles, he's thinking of genre filmmakers, but then he's filming actions and that are very mundane and everyday. So
no, I like you bringing that into the conversation. I listened to an interview, I think, where he talked about that he actually needed to be convinced of the iPhone's ability to capture what he wanted, the way he wanted.
Because this is also 10 years ago, like the capabilities of the iPhone 5S and the capabilities of whatever iPhone we're on now are very different.
Yeah.
It did make me think as I was watching this, I was like, Boy, nothing I've ever shot looks as good as this. No, they really got something. These innovations. Two things in particular that he mentioned. I think one was the anamorphic lens.
One's
and I think
the rig.
There was
there was an app that he was using.
Filmic Pro.
That's it. That could increase the compression, I think.
Yeah, that was one of the things it could do. Yeah.
And it was also so he could control focus. I mean, because when we film, we have to touch the camera all the time.
You focus
have to lock
here.
the focus. And you can't control exposure directly.
Right.
The iPhone is always like you have this little
up, down.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
all you get.
Yeah.
And even when you take a photo, I'm sure all of us have noticed, like there's some image processing going on where it never ends up, like if you want it to be really dark, it never ends up being as dark as you wanted.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that app allows you to really completely control the lens of the built-in camera.
There's some good footage on the DVD behind the scenes features of like Sean Baker and of the other cinematographer for the film, Radium Chung, of like what, the actual rigs that they used. And there were like, they would have like, they're not selfie sticks, but like, devices to hold the iPhones, and also they would be propped on bikes too.
Yeah, the mount on the bicycle. And even when they first show that, I would think it would be some sort of very fast moving scene, but it ends up just being like Alexandra and Cindy just walking down the street.
Right.
But Baker is behind them on a bicycle.
Well,
I love it. It's sort of like the answer to a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Very DIY.
Well, yeah, like in the French Connection.
Exactly.
Yeah. But it's also made me think, not that I'm an expert on this, but it kind of made me think of the aesthetic of skate videos.
I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Same.
Yeah.
I thought of skate videos a ton watching this.
I think as we talk about all this, I mean, perhaps the hints have come across, but we'd be remiss if we didn't mention directly that Sean Baker resorted to the iPhone and considered DSLRs not simply because he wanted to, but due to budgetary constraints.
Yeah.
Yeah, and immediately the comparison that came to mind there was to Bamboozled, where Spike Lee, like that movie famously has its mini DV aesthetic, but Spike Lee did that, because his budget was low.
Yeah, I felt that right away in the kind of reverse shot in the very beginning of the film. Reminded me a ton of what we see from the Dunwitty office scenes in Bamboozled, how it's like you can literally feel the presence of multiple cameras cross-cutting between one another. So
yeah, I mean, that's another benefit of shooting on an iPhone is that you get some more iPhones. Like it's easy to shoot on multiple iPhones. I know he kept a pretty small crew. I think he said he had like 6 to 8 people at any given time, but he was able to use multiple iPhones in a way that obviously many films also have multiple cameras, but you're still kind of limited with how you're able to place everything.
Cool.
Right. And just before we transition away from talking about the visual aesthetics of this film, I also just have to, because we talked about that bus stop scene, I also just have to praise Tangerine for being one of the few films to capture the LA subway.
Oh, good point.
It doesn't happen that often. There are only 4 films I can think of that I've seen that do it, and 2 of them are directed by Michael Mann.
I was just going to say, you brought Michael Mann up earlier, and all I could think of was Collateral.
Collateral and Heat is the other one.
Oh, the Heat.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right. Thank you.
Yeah, it's Heat, Collateral, Tangerine, and the other one I think of is the Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu movie Bardo.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the most recent film he's released as of this recording, which I thought was underrated. I recommend checking it out. But there is a memorable scene on the LA subway in that movie too.
Very cool. How about we get into comparison corner?
Yeah.
Totally.
What do we think?
Already done a little bit of it.
Yeah.
No, that's very true.
Yeah, I mean, do any of you have comparisons that jump out right away?
Can I give you guys one that jumped out in the weirdest way, but I just couldn't help but feel it? Moonstruck.
Okay.
There is a vibe in this movie that feels like a His Girl Friday.
Yeah.
There's like a patter between a lot of the characters that is so snappy. And I couldn't help but feel like I was getting pulled into this movie the way that a lot of those kind of screwball comedies that Moonstruck is very much in conversation with. The way that those movies try to pull you in, which I think is just a huge credit to the movie and to the casting of those characters. But I also like that both Moonstruck and Tangerine, they're movies that take place over a rather short, defined amount of time. And the absence of a central character becomes the backdrop for a number of things to happen, and a lot of personal reckonings and whatnot. I feel like they're also ruminations on infidelity. I feel like
that's
both
what
of
I was
those,
going to say.
I think they have like slight zags
Yeah.
on what that really means and what infidelity means to different people.
Yeah, because Moonstruck like almost kind of endorses its infidelity. It's like, well, yes, like these people are unfaithful, but they belong together. You don't
Exactly.
feel that in this film.
Absolutely not. That's on the mind, I think, of both of these movies. And then the other thing that just jumped out to me was the very end, the way that all the characters converge
In this very
in this climactic moment. And there are a bunch of personal revelations that come out. And I was trying to do the math of like, is Cindy Cher or does Chester suddenly become the Cher character? And is Rosmic the John Mahoney character, the Rosmic in this film?
Yeah.
And my brain was working to go there. And I was like, I feel like there's something here.
And these parallel scenes are also kind of extended as, in comparison to the rest of the film.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
In each
Well, while watching Tangerine this time, I mean, I think, it's worth saying that it is in many ways a singular movie. So it's some comparisons are hard to draw, but one movie that has come out since the release of this film and since the last time I saw it, that immediately came to mind due to certain details. Fun fact, too, it actually came up in our previous episode about Sean Baker, though I think it came up not in reference to Anora, but to Good Time. It was Zola.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, that on the surface level, there are a lot of similarities that, both are movies about sex workers dealing with, like these characters with ulterior motives.
Right.
And, it's like there are some very stark differences, but, Zola also takes place in a very sunny setting, short period of time in Florida. In that case, I think it's actually kind of a cross country journey, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I believe so.
But the detail that that I learned that immediately brought Zola to mind more than anything else was actually something from a behind the scenes feature on the DVD where Sean Baker mentioned that he heard from them this story that is basically what you see in the film, and he just thought immediately, like, this is our story.
Yeah, that's very Zola. Like, is inspired by a Twitter thread.
Exactly.
I like that.
That was where it really jumped out at me. So yeah, Tangerine and Zola, both really excellent movies, I think. Pretty conspicuously in dialogue with one another.
Cool.
Totally. I mean, this film is the closest that I've seen any 21st century filmmaker get to like early John Waters.
I thought of John Waters too.
Yeah. I mean,
come back to that later, but
the DIY elements of early John Waters films, pretty much anything up until like Hairspray. You look at this, I actually haven't seen any Baker films before this one. So I haven't seen Starlet or Prince of Broadway or the others. So I don't know if this is also the case of his earlier films, but that was something that I think really stuck with me because you guys know I'm a big John Waters fan, and it's so hard to kind of capture that particular DIY energy where it just feels like you were talking, Edo, earlier about how experimental and inventive Baker has to be in this film because of the constrictions that he has. And you see that in John Waters also because he has like no money. Right, basically, he's extremely young at the time. He has an extremely like small crew and cast, a lot of which overlap, and which is also the case in this film.
True, 100%.
So
yeah,
I love that. So just sort of more generally, the John Waters canon.
Yeah, exactly.
Not canon.
Yeah, I'd say things from like the Trash trilogy and even a few things beyond that. I'd say in particular the Trash trilogy, I think.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
I like that.
For me, the movie's not really a narrative experience primarily because I think it's a very thin narrative and it's a very kind of classical narrative. Like we're thinking for so long that the story is about one character's infidelity and it turns out to be about another character's infidelity and this relationship that we think of as a parallel relationship where you have two characters and they both are having crappy days and one's crappy day revolves around one problem and the others revolves around another problem, but we realize that that is in fact the core relationship of the movie. So that's in a lot of movies, and that's a a narrative fate that's very familiar. And I don't think it's that. I think the characters are pretty thin in the movie. I think that not just the two central characters, but all the characters are fairly thin. And this sort of moment at the end, this choral moment where he's threading it all together, is a sort of like very desperate attempt to like give it all this pathos.
Yeah.
But to his credit, he's very, he's obviously very gifted. So for instance, when Dinah goes back to the motel and she asks to be let back in, and the madam is Madam Julian, who's the actress that was discovered on Vine, tells her, no, I found another girl. I no longer, but so you just have to wait. And then Dinah sits down, and she's already lost this one shoe when she was abducted, and she just sits down and she kicks the shoe, the remaining shoe off of her foot, and it just kind of like bounces a little bit, and it like kind of lands perfectly at the bottom of the frame, and that's like just a bit of visual. That's a visual grace note that he's very good at executing these kinds of things. These are very. This is like back to, as you're mentioning, His Girl Friday. Like this is back to screwball comedy day. Like this is not actually new. It's quite to have it be in this setting and this world with these types of characters, with two transgender leads. Like that is a variation.
Sure.
But all the tropes and the archetypes, that's like as old as comedy itself, right? Like that goes, so that, like I actually think of him as a very like classical director, and the later movies really bear that out, because once he gets to Florida Project, that's what he's making. And why I like Tangerine so much, maybe I'm being repetitive, is that all of that is there, but it's not cohering. So what you're left with is these individual kind of moments of magic. Yeah. And I like that about it. I like that it's not, for me, it doesn't really function as a narrative. I mean, yes, it's a very sweet ending. I love that last scene.
Yeah, same.
It's very touching in and of itself. I'm not sure how like meaningful I find. Like I don't know that I know enough about these characters, or that they're characters enough for me to attach a more profound feeling to it. But as a kind of just gesture of camaraderie, that's nice.
I wanted to say too, you described some of these characters as feeling a little thin, which I don't think is incorrect at all. But I also love the ending, because I feel like the ending itself is, as you said, it's a small gesture.
Yeah.
It is not something that is there that is meant to solve all of their problems. It is quite literally, it's commensurate with all the ways you've seen the characters before.
Yeah.
Which is it's a small gesture, and sometimes that's all you need.
Yeah,
and sometimes small gestures speak very loudly, or they feel much bigger. And I liked that about where the ending
totally
went.
I mean, I think it's to the movie's strength that it doesn't try to build like complex characters out of them. This is such a simple enough demonstration of
like sisterhood,
of companionship, and care, that I've seen enough to know that at least this exists between them, right?
Yeah.
Like we don't have to read much depth of motivation or into it.
It's a good way to put it. And as you were talking about it, this just hit me. Like, what else the ending of Tangerine makes me think of? Another ending specifically.
What is that?
This is awfully open-ended.
You're going to need to be more specific.
Carol.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sure.
There being a very small gesture that speaks volumes at the end of it, but also
that when they're at the restaurant?
When they're at the restaurant, but even
before
that, though, it's just, it kind of looks like it's all over.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And, it looks like it's all over, but then it turns out it's not. And they don't come together, because of the same reason at the end of that movie. But then, the way that the last shot is just that one small gesture. Those come out the same year. And I think that Carol is the one that is maybe a little more saliently a Christmas movie. Not that Tangerine isn't, but it's just that the visual aesthetics of it are more commonly associated with that time.
Can we just take a few minutes to talk about why we think Christmas Eve is the day that this is set. Does anybody thought a little bit about that? I know we're talking holiday films. To me, there's something about Christmas and holidays where there's like a warmth that we are asked, I think, to participate in or kind of get enveloped into. And I feel like this movie, partially because of the iPhone, partially because of how it's shot, there is very little like holiday warmth in this.
Yeah.
The neon lights are almost blinding when it's at night, and the sun is always just like screaming through windows. Like I literally kind of wanted to put my hand over my eyes at moments in this film. I want to say that part of it is the juxtaposition of what you would normally associate with a kind of holiday spirit, holiday warmth. But also, I think this idea that this is a story that is centered around transgender sex workers.
Yeah.
I think there is something about just the very humanistic need for everybody to feel a sense of family. They can feel a sense of that warmth. Yeah.
In the scene where Alexandra, she has a confrontation with the police and the cop says something to her like, you know, we don't want to have to call our families from prison. And she says something like, what family? And I think that to me is part of why it's important that this is set on Christmas Eve, because I do think Baker wants to call attention to the fact that oftentimes sex workers and people who are in that line of work, not universally, but it's not uncommon for people in this line of work to be estranged from their families in some way and their holidays to look a little bit different and them to have more of a chosen family. And what I think these characters have in some ways found with each other, but chosen families can be just as complicated as regular families.
Right.
Yeah. And also the sense too that like, because people think of these holidays as being times for some kind of relaxation or withdrawal from your problems, that like if something's not going as it's meant to, it feels like it stands out more.
Yeah.
So that was part of my take on, you know, the emphasis that comes from this being set on Christmas Eve. And then, also like having to do with the like timing of this movie and like its means of production. I think the only scene when you get that confirmed by anything other than what the characters speak is when they're on the bus and you see it says December 24th.
Right.
One other, I think, placement of Christmas is you pass like a Christmas tree
display
well, like when's the call where they sell the Christmas trees out on the street, whatever. And there's a sign that's like Christmas tree sale 50% off because it's Christmas Eve. So it's like
you waited this long
trying to get rid of
one.
the last few Christmas trees.
Exactly.
Well, the main appearance of Christmas is in Karen Karagulian's character's home.
Yeah.
Good point. Yes.
And he's the one who has this traditional nuclear family, and he's obviously completely unhappy in it.
Right.
And that's sort of what I meant by I find the characters a bit thin, because that whole idea of this Armenian taxi driver who is closeted, is spending his nights going and patronizing sex workers in his cab. And his wife knows and is turning a blind eye. And that's a very like generalized, you know, like ripped from the newspapers kind of like story. You know, it's almost like some special on you know,
Dateline or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is it's meant to be this ironic contrast, right? That the one kind of
traditional,
this white male character, this white cis male guy who has a family, is in fact desperately unhappy and is not really, like, in terms of his sexuality, it's not what he expresses in his everyday life.
Right.
And the last shot of him is of him sitting next to the Christmas tree.
Yeah.
Which is maybe my favorite shot of this whole film.
So I think like the Christmas setting is accentuating that ironic contrast.
Yeah.
I like that.
It works because these kinds of things always work. These kind of types and, you know, reversals of roles and fortune are like it's the stuff of drama. And in this case, of a kind of like tragicomic storyline. But I think the Christmas setting is nice because it's LA. And
right. Really bucks that, yeah.
You know, there's none, like, it doesn't, there's no reason that these people need to be getting out from the cold.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what's cold in their lives is just the harshness of conditions for people who are marginalized.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
well said.
Cool.
Also, like, while we're quickly transitioning away from that point, I mean, yes, like that character that that Karen Karagulian plays, Razmik, like he's very much a type and how the way he's set up. But another thing that came up, Karagulian said it directly in one of the DVD bonus features, is that this movie was also great for the representation of Armenian Americans. And that, like, well, one of the actors, the one who plays Ashkin, the mother-in-law who hunts him down, that she's like a very famous actress, Ala Tumanian in Armenia, but also that the actor who plays Karo, the other cab driver, Arsen Grigorian, that he became famous because of this movie.
Yeah, he hosts the Armenian Voice.
Yeah, or at least he did at the time.
Yeah, I don't know that
DVD.
he still does. I don't know that it's still on, but he did.
I love that.
So we've talked a little bit about our two leads, Maya Taylor and Katana Kiki Rodriguez. They famously make their film debuts in Tangerine after being discovered by Sean Baker on the streets of LA. Sean Baker and then the co-writer of this film, Chris Bergosh. They encounter Maya at an LGBT center and they get to know her. They tell her about, kind of what they're doing. And then she's the one that introduces them to Katana Kiki Rodriguez. But these two famously make their film debuts in Tangerine. But in addition to these two actresses, this film has a really broad range of performers. It has like LA lifers, like people who have just been working consistently in small parts and bit parts for decades in LA. You have regular Sean Baker players like Karagulian. You have Armenian celebrities. You have Vine stars. So how do you guys think this mix of seasoned actors and then emerging talent was able to serve the film? And were there any moments from the supporting cast that stuck out to you?
Yeah, it's a really great mix of presences. My immediate thought, if I had to briefly encapsulate, like describe what it's like to have all these actors together, my thought is just only in a Sean Baker film.
Yeah.
This specific group of people. I also thought this is another basis for like that John Waters comparison, that, of like having regular players that are in all of your movies. I think that
the Dreamlanders,
yeah. I think that it was true going into this. It's been true going into other Sean Baker films as well, that I often assume that more of the cast are those kind of like discovered on the street, kind of never acted before sort of people. So then when you look through the cast, a lot of these people are like, some of them don't even totally fit any of these broader categories. They're kind of just actors who took a job. That like someone like Josh Sussman, who plays the car vomiter.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's like one of those character actors that I think we've like all seen in the background somewhere. Like he was on episodes of Drake and Josh.
Yeah.
And here he is like 10 years later in Tangerine. The name of that character is very amusing too. It is Wretch Chunder.
We'll be coming back to that, by the way.
Yeah. But that, he's like, in a colloquial sense, like that guy kind of guy.
Yeah.
And that like Scott Krinsky, who plays the parsimonious John.
He's the one that I had in mind as like kind of an LA lifer. Like he said, you probably saw this same bonus feature. He's the one outside of the club that Alexander is performing at. And he was out there for so long, and he lives in that neighborhood that people are coming up to him and were like, are you managing this club now? Just because that's just his neighborhood. Like he's been working in LA for decades.
Yeah. And then like also Clu Gulager, who plays the Cherokee, that he was like, he's sadly passed away since the movie was made. He was in like his late 80s at the time the movie was made, but you look at his credits and he was in like Don Siegel movies back in the day.
Yeah, he's in like The Last Picture Show.
Yeah.
Wow.
And fun fact that the actor who plays the guy, like in this scene when Dinah is taken away from the motel room, that the actor who plays the guy in the shower who's like, what have I done? That is Clu Gulager's son, John Gulager.
I think it was Clu Gulager who was a big fan of Starlet.
Oh, interesting.
And had met Sean Baker previously and told him like I've seen Starlet twice, and Sean Baker was like, why? But Clu Gallagher was like, the next time you make a film, like I want to be in it, hit me up. And then I think it was one of the producers that kind of reminded Sean Baker of this fact, like don't forget to give Clu a call.
Yeah. And then, but like, so I mean, I'm obviously much more aware of like the cast this time watching the movie, but I think the one actor from the first viewing who stood out to me as like someone I could connect to other things I've seen is James Ransone.
Yeah, I think he's one of the more established actors.
I'd say so too.
Yeah, like he was on The Wire.
Yeah,
but then and some of these people too, like also if you're if this was at for many as it was the point of entry to the Sean Baker filmography, you don't know that these are regular players of his.
Yeah,
people like Mickey O'Hagan who plays Dinah, or Shi Ching Tsao, who was the co-director of Takeout and also plays the owner of Donut Time in the movie.
And she's a producer on this. She's the costume designer.
Yeah, co-director of Takeout.
Yeah.
Thank
she
you.
just directed her own film.
Exactly.
Yes.
That was
Director
co-written
of
by
it,
Sean Baker too.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And is not an actress. She's a producer, really, and now filmmaker. Other filmmakers of Sean's generation are known for this, like the Safdie brothers are the most obvious, are known for this use of and blending of non-professional actors with professional
established actors.
Yeah, established actors. And most of the actors in this, even if were professional by the time this was made, Karen Karagulian wasn't a professional actor when Sean encountered him. Nor I think was Mickey O'Hagan.
Yeah.
I don't think she was a professional actor when he first encountered her. But they've became so after. I mean, Karen Karagulian's about to be in the next David Fincher movie.
Yeah,
that's right.
The sequel to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. One of the great things about his career has been that he's kind of gotten people these ways into the industry. I actually was sad to see that for Maya Taylor and Kiki Rodriguez, that hasn't seemed to be the case.
I know.
When I looked up their filmographies, this was it for Kiki, and then Maya's done a few things.
Yeah, but minimal.
Yeah. I think that in the film, what's nice about the fact that he does this is that it simulates the variety of human experience that you might have over the course of a day, where you're just encountering like a very random and motley assortment of characters. And so that sequence where Karagulian is picking up and dropping off people in his cab that kind of introduces him is wonderful because of all it becomes like a Rolodex of characters that are going through his cab. And the Clue scene where he talks about how he got his Cherokee name.
Oh yeah.
Mia, I think.
For me, it's like the single most memorable moment in the film. I think I'm going to be holding on to that moment more than the rest of the movie, because it's such a. I mean, that's something that clearly only Gulager himself could have brought.
Yeah, right. I think it's improvised.
And much of the movie is improvised, and Baker characterized it as like a scriptment. It was like halfway between a script and a treatment, and that scenes like the donut climax had to be fully scripted, especially because there were actors who weren't speaking in English, and so you had to script every line if Sean was going to follow it. But then when Cindy and Alexandra are walking down the street and just kind of making fun of the passersby while they're also talking about their dilemmas, much of that is improvised, and it feels that way. And it's nice because you get a sense that this is what they actually their daily lives actually are like.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
what their conversations actually are.
Yeah, there's a realism
do
to
consist of. Yeah, and so I think that is the virtue of it. And again, why I think that if he had tried to make, once he's making a movie like Anora, like Mikey Madison, only an actor could play that part.
Yeah,
because
the range that's being asked.
The range and the amount of close-ups that she has on her, how much she has to just do with her face.
Sure.
Yeah.
When you have like mostly extreme wide angle shots and the characters are mostly defined by action, there's less of that pressure on them. I mean, that sequence in the bus stop that we talked about earlier, that's like one of the few moments where Kiki really has to do something, because she's not asked to
interact with
she's not dragging someone down the street.
She's literally just sitting there, like, and an emotion has to well up on her face. And that so for me, that's like the most impressive moment of acting in the movie, because she has to kind of create the anxiety herself.
Right. I like that.
Yeah. And also going on the topic of great emotional moments, like the teardrop from Maya Taylor when that reveal happens at donut time.
Yeah.
That it's like, I mean, yeah, like, forget the lack of credits. Like, you've got a real actor when something like that occurs. And then, despite the differences in how Sean Baker came to them, that there is a similarity in how he cast Katana, Kiki Rodriguez, and Maya Taylor to how he cast Mikey Madison, which was kind of just on vibes. That he met Katana and Maya and knew immediately from how they interacted with people, like they'd be great in a movie. And that Mikey Madison, I think he hadn't met personally at first, but he had seen her on screen and knew he wanted to work with her.
And he had these ideas, but he didn't have scripts for either of these yet, I don't think. At the time he's meeting, he meets these lead actresses, and that, I think, inspires his screenwriting.
Yeah.
One other thing I heard Sean Baker say was, obviously, a newer actor who's learning on set is able to learn from these more seasoned actors and is able to kind of pick up on habits from multiple people in a way that they're able to bring this, like, these fresh eyes to the screen, but also to kind of get a crash course as well. So I think that's another benefit to having this kind of mix.
It makes me think a little bit of something that Paul Thomas Anderson said about directing Cooper Hoffman and Alana Hayam in Licorice Pizza. That, like, he had them run so much in that movie because they were new actors. He had them run so much to kind of like get into places where they were acting impulsively. They weren't thinking about what they were doing.
Yeah.
And I mean, it may not literally have been the same sort of experience doing Tangerine, but I feel like in effect there must have been many similarities.
Totally.
Sure. Well, I was struck by the approach that Sean Baker and co-writer Chris Burgach took in researching for Tangerine, and that their time on Santa Monica and Highland, to me, felt very akin to the kind of work that documentary filmmakers like Steve James or Barbara Koppel do, where they ingratiate themselves with their subjects and win their trust, and then curate stories with these subjects on film. And I was curious to ask you all what we thought of an approach that's informed in some way by documentary. And I was wondering how you guys felt about that when it comes to telling fictional stories.
I think that the results, if it's really done carefully, can sometimes be like more real than what is real. Then there's like an access you get to the inner life of a character by telling the story fictionally that you don't necessarily get if you're making a documentary. And that, like, you can get access to a person by in the documentary format, but immediately what I'm thinking about is watching, as we did a year and a half ago for this podcast, watching Don't Look Back, and how much, when faced with an interviewer or a camera, that Bob Dylan just obfuscates. Sure. That, and maybe that, that like kind of conversely gives a window to his inner life. But I feel like what you can do in a movie like Tangerine, like as this scene we keep referring to of the bus stop, of like what that conveys of a character's inner life, doesn't necessarily feel like what would be done in a conventional documentary. And yet there is something, I think, arguably more vivid about it, which is not to disparage documentaries that aim for the same thing. I just feel like it's done differently.
Great.
I mean, I think it's a classic approach, right? Doing research is, I think, obviously good if you're a filmmaker. You should do research. You should know something about the world that you're making a film about. And
this world is, I think, admittedly such a different world than the world he knows.
Yeah, sure. I think that the film exploits this reality. And you mean that in both a negative and positive sense. This
I'm
is what
with
the
you.
Safdies do too.
Yeah.
And often Baker and the Safdies have been criticized for this. Like this is always a question, the question of access and then what you do with it and collaboration and whether it's at the level of the collaborators, whether it's really a collaboration or whether it's more extractive.
Yeah.
But I think that what works about Tangerine is that a lot of it is so raw, right? A lot of it is not fully yet shaped into a narrative. The things about it that are most sticky and interesting are the things that feel like they're kind of capturing something that is happening on the streets every day.
Yeah, I think Baker being able to go to the two lead actresses and to say, this is what we want / need to happen in this scene. These are this is what we've written loosely for the lines, but we want you to put your voice to it. We want it to feel authentic. If there's something that does not feel like something that would happen in your life or the lives of the people that you know who are kind of the basis for the story that we're telling, then we want to fix that. I think that it brings this empathy. Baker brings this empathy to these characters that keeps it on the positive side of exploitation.
I couldn't agree with you more. I feel like that's one of the through lines of this film. I feel like there is a lot of empathy in how it's told. And there is just a reality, I think, sometimes that we are not always privy to. We don't always want to see. We are not always shown in films. And to me, I that's one of the, I don't want to say saving graces of this movie, but maybe when we talk about the squishy kind of uncomfortableness of like, is this exploitation? Is this not? I think that's one of the things that kind of puts it, like you say, on the right side of this conversation.
And I think the fact that these actresses are involved through much of the post-production as well.
I read that too.
Yeah, like Baker talks about, he edits his own films famously, last year when he swept the Oscars, that was one of many. He won that one, right?
Yeah. I mean, he won all going up.
He edits this film, and he said he was editing about like 10 minutes at a time, and he had Katana Kiki Rodriguez in particular come over and give her thoughts as he's editing. So even at that point in the process, he wants her input. He wants her to have control over how she as a character is portrayed on screen. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I like that.
And then, there was something, Emilio, you said earlier about like how, from after 4-letter words, he decides to kind of turn outward and make these stories about people other than himself. And I think that you see that even like if you haven't seen the movie, it's just kind of knowing the premises of some of his earlier films.
Yeah.
It shows kind of from the beginning, but in those, it doesn't really feel like there's this big grandeur of like, oh, look at the life of someone whose life you didn't previously understand. It really feels very fly on the wall.
Yeah. Would we like to shout out any notable moments or fun details from this film? I got a couple, but I'd love to open that up to everybody else.
One very minor moment that I like in the donut shop at the end is when Cindy tells Rosmick's mother-in-law, that is a cute ass blouse. Because they're matching. They're both in leopard print.
I love it. Yes. There's so many moments in that. There was a moment earlier in that scene too, and I can't remember what exactly was being said. I believe it was Alexandra who is listening to Dinah speak, and she just stops and she says, "Girl, I'm losing sympathy for you by the minute." And just the reading on that was chef's kiss.
Excellent.
It was so good.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of like basically throwaway lines in the movie that are, great if you take a second to keep track of them. One character we haven't mentioned yet is Nash, who's like that. I think he's supposed to be like a drug dealer that works in the back of that burrito shop.
Yeah, he's some kind of business partner of Chester's.
Yeah, it's not exactly clarified, but that the first time that that Cindy and Alexandra come up to him looking for the whereabouts of Chester, that his initial response to Cindy is, okay, first of all, get some Tic Tacs.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
I like that. I think the second person, I'm trying to remember who she was, right when Cindy leaves Donut Time, the first in the beginning.
Mhm.
Initially, she finds someone in front of like a convenience store and she's
Yeah.
trying to get information out of her. And I love how it starts off being kind of confrontational and you don't even see it, but it's intimated that this person has given her a cigarette and all of a sudden the energy between them changes and they part extremely amicably.
Yeah.
I find that to be a really interesting detail. I love how it's like, oh, well, you know what? This person kind of extended you this olive branch. Like, I know we don't have a lot, bitch. I know I'm broke or whatever. Like, I can't remember exactly what was said, but it was something to that effect. And she's like, here, let's talk about this over a cigarette.
Yeah.
And I really liked that. That was something, that's the kind of detail that I think comes from experience, not necessarily like from someone writing something on Final Draft, you know, on their computer late at night or whatever.
Well, along similar lines, I mean, we talked about the result of this, like what comes from this interaction, but we haven't talked about the interaction itself yet, which is like right at the beginning of this car wash blowjob sequence that when Alexandra sees Razmik and she's like, oh, what a sight for sore eyes, that these two have like kind of an innate comfort with one another.
Yeah.
As regular customer and provider of services. That I think that was actually talked about in one of the bonus features as well as being like a brief but very consequential interaction that you see between the characters that also has a lived experience element.
Yeah, you see it also juxtaposed against the other guy.
Yeah.
The other guy. And so there are these big swings that sometimes happen for people in this line of work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you come across people who are ready to dehumanize you. And then there are also people that are there who are going to have a more professional type of interaction with you. So
yeah,
I like that. Yeah.
We've talked a lot about the sisterhood element, like the friendship element between Cindy and Alexandra, and particularly that gesture at the end. But another gesture that I was thinking about was actually between Cindy and Dinah, where I can't remember exactly at what point this happens, but Cindy actually fixes Dinah's makeup because it's like she's been, abducted and dragged all over the place. She has one shoe. She looks a mess and her makeup is very streaky. But Cindy actually eventually takes the time to kind of clean it up. And I thought that was very touching because these two characters have been like at odds with each other through everything.
Yeah.
No, that's a nice way of putting it. Yeah.
It almost makes me think of like the haircut scene in Marriage Story.
Yeah.
Right. You're like, truce.
Yeah.
But I think to your point, that is the empathy in this movie. While we see Cindy behave very rationally, we as an audience, I think, feel uncomfortable being party to. Yeah. There is this switch where she goes, okay, look, we have something in common.
Yeah.
And your presentation is an important part of how you're making it in the world. Let me take a moment to acknowledge that for you, which to me is all empathy. I think it's one of the real strengths that this movie has running through it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Is there any last thing we want to mention?
One last thing, just kind of a moment of amusing irony considering the way that this movie was made is that there's that scene maybe 25 minutes in where there are these three other women who are ostensibly associated with Cindy and Alexandra, who Alexandra is across the street and says something about don't forget my show tonight, and they're a little bit snide to her. Mm-hmm. But then, as those women are kind of talking amongst themselves, there's a passerby in a car who rolls the window down and films them with his phone. Mm-hmm. And I just thought that moment of it's like this is, the opposite side of the camera that actually filmed this.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And probably also an iPhone or something of that nature.
Yeah. Meant to be, just part of the organic scenery, but I couldn't not think of the irony of that while watching.
I like that quite a bit.
That's good.
Hi, listeners. If you've heard us before, then you know that this is when we usually start our Unlikely Shared Universe segment. And we're still going to do that, but with a small programming note to share before we do. You will hear us talk about the actor James Ransone by way of his character in this film, Chester. Our conversation with Edo was recorded about 10 days before the news of Ransone's untimely death was made public. And what you hear is not and never was intended as a reflection of James Ransone, the human being on this planet. It's just some nerdy fun amongst movie lovers about the characters that he's played. His passing is a very tragic thing. We've all chatted after this talk about what's happened, and we're all feeling it. He was a very talented actor who left quite the impression on us. So we at the Sleepless Cinematic Podcast, we offer our heartfelt condolences to James's family and his loved ones at this time. May he rest in peace. And now, back to our conversation.
All right, I think it's time to share some unlikely universes.
I love this.
Totally.
Yeah.
Anyone want to kick this off?
I don't mind kicking it off.
Go for it.
Do it.
You don't mind. All right. When we finally meet Chester, I don't think anyone watching is expecting to have a favorable opinion of him. Everything we say, Cindy say about him makes him sound like an asshole and a loser, which check and check. He very much is, which is surprising because less than 10 years before this, Chester was part of a very disciplined, highly skilled group of criminals helmed by one Dalton Russell that held up a well-established bank in Lower Manhattan. This was not your average smash and grab job and required expert levels of discretion and secrecy to pull off. Because I'd like to not spoil this movie, let's just say that Chester, in his New York City crime days, goes about his business after this heist. And in order to avoid capture and lower his profile there in the city, moves out west, perhaps making some stops along the way to ply his trade. But no longer under the tutelage and watchful eye of his mentor Dalton, Chester gets lazy, resorting to low-level crime on his way to the Los Angeles area. After a short stint in jail for drug-related charges, he finds he no longer has the trust of even lower-level criminals and falls back on his diminishing looks to enter sex work, ultimately securing a tenuous position as a pimp for a number of sex workers on Santa Monica and Highland. It's a life of squandered potential, something far from the precision and dedication it took to attempt the big job he was once a part of in the Big Apple. Does anybody know this movie?
I do not.
I don't think I do either.
Edo, do you have any thoughts?
I know the movie.
Cool. Do you want to share?
It's Inside Man.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, yes, I forgot he was in that.
Yes.
Still haven't seen it.
Any chance I can, I will talk about Inside Man on this podcast. This is one of the more entertaining, just well-made, full of stars, just sit back and enjoy kind of movie. And James Ransone, who is Chester in Tangerine, also happens to be one of the criminals that helps pull off this bank heist in The Inside Man. Yes, Edo, thank you for that.
I'm just going to say that while I appreciate this shared universe hypothesis, I think the Generation Kill shared universe hypothesis would have been more apt.
Maybe so. I'm not familiar with Generation Kill, but
so James Ransone is in Generation Kill, which is a David Simon miniseries about the first 6 days of the invasion of Iraq, and it's this. They're kind of like a Hummer troupe,
okay,
and Ransone is one of the men in this Hummer troupe, and he's totally crazy. And he's every episode he's really into rap, this character, so he's just always doing rap lyrics.
Okay, there we go. I see that.
And I just love the idea that Ransone's character, after he was discharged, ends up on the streets of LA, running game. That would seem appropriate for that character.
Yeah, he often plays a bit of a live wire.
Yeah, I was
certainly in The Wire.
Yeah. I was trying actually to make my connection to another movie he's in called Mr. Right. Has anybody seen Mr. Right?
No.
If you're Sam Rockwell pilled like I am, it's a very fun movie, but I just couldn't really make it work. I really like your Generation Kill reference here.
Well, we'll also just explain how screwed up Chester is because he's got PTSD.
Yeah. Dude, see, Edo, you're crushing this, dude.
Totally.
Very nice. Anyone else?
I could go next.
Let's do it.
So early in the film, we talked about seeing Rosmic pick up several different patrons in his cab. And one of these, as we said, is credited as Wretch Chunder, which is a name that is really just setting this guy up for failure. And on the DVD bonus features, the actor Josh Sussman gives us a little bit of backstory for this character and his companion, which is played by the film's co-writer. He said that these guys are headed to a party, but they're painfully shy and they get nervous around girls. So they thought that some libations would loosen them up, but it just made one of them conk out and the other vomit all over Rosmic's cab. I really hope the gossip mill doesn't get a wind of this, because you see, the young man that this film knows as Wretch Chunder is actually Jacob Ben Israel, and he's recently moved to LA after graduating high school in Ohio. And in school, he was known to run a very active blog about school goings on, regularly interviewing school athletes and members of other clubs and teams like the Glee Club. His penchant for breaking hot goss gets him in trouble a few times, such as when he attempted to interview a cheerleader after she shaved her head and was beaten repeatedly with an umbrella. Oh. So hopefully there aren't any gossip columnists around to see him retch, or he might need to grab an umbrella.
I wish I could say what this is, but I'm stumped.
There was a hint.
I am stumped on this one too.
Okay, this is a television show.
Is this the one that you mentioned earlier?
No,
it's not Drake and Josh.
It's not Drake and a little later than that.
Okay,
and again, there was a hint.
Television is not my field.
That is fine. It's a show you will all be familiar with, but I doubt any of you have watched. This is Glee.
Okay. Lord.
You are correct about that.
Yeah. I watched the first couple seasons. I honestly don't have much of a memory of him in Glee, but apparently from kind of doing my research, he kind of starts every season where it's like the school year is starting, and this guy with his little microphone
he's like the
here.
Sam Jackson and Do the Right Thing.
Exactly.
He's setting the scene.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I like that.
And that actor Josh Sussman too. It was said on one of the DVD bonus features that, probably not surprisingly, he was actually vomiting in that scene.
Yeah, that's insane. By the way,
I thank you for bringing this up, and not to drag this conversation into the gutter, but if that was not actual vomit, would have been the best throwing up retching captured on camera.
Well,
it was,
I recently went to the Museum of the Moving Image, and they have the tube from The Exorcist that makes her projectile vomit. So I've been thinking now about vomiting. When I see people vomit in films, I think about the production and the little tubes. And I was like, this doesn't seem possible.
This is method as fuck.
Josh Sussman said that he had got actually brought several bottles of alcohol in order to induce that.
Yeah, he just got super drunk on set.
Again, method as fuck. Wow.
Yeah, and that Karen Karagulian, there was a point shooting that scene. I think you see it briefly in the final cut where he was kind of looking up to Sean, expecting him to say cut, but that he and some other crew members were vomiting in response.
This was one of those one person starts vomiting and then everyone around them sympathetically starts vomiting. And apparently every Sean Baker movie has vomiting in it.
I was going to say this is the second time that Karen Karagulian is driving a car and somebody vomits in it, and then a woman later in another scene comments about how awful the smell is.
Yeah,
because that is. Also happens in Enora.
Yeah, totally. But I'd have to watch the other Sean Baker movies again to remember the
vomit.
The vomit scenes. Yeah. Well,
moving away from vomit.
Well, anyway, so after the debacle that Dinah endures when caught between the relationship, or when caught in the middle of the relationship between Cindy and Chester, she becomes set on finding a way out of the fraught existence that she has been forced to experience as a sex worker in LA. After happening on some better circumstances, she ditches LA to start a new life in Las Vegas. And having been severely disillusioned about love and sex life after her traumatic experience, she wonders if there may be a little more stability in presiding over those whose relationships are on the rocks, if not entirely falling apart. Dinah thus goes through the steps to become a divorce registrar in Las Vegas. Okay. And given the high volume of weddings that occur in this city, steady work becomes more or less a guarantee for her looking forward. Some of the divorces which she certifies are relatively innocuous, while others are sensational, including one involving the son of a Russian oligarch and a young woman from New York. Dinah keeps a straight face as she presides over this rather acrimonious divorce and bears witness to the myriad characters who played a part in its occurrence, but can't help but chuckle a little when the young woman from New York throws a searing insult at the family of her now ex-husband, and also can't help but sympathize a little with this young woman's plight, given some ways that it reminds her of her own past. When all is said and done, Dinah at least exits this situation receiving a nice new coat for simply doing her job.
Yeah, I know. And she's like, is this real?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an easy one.
Yeah. And, you know, the Baker verse over here.
Yeah. How often have we connected a film to another film by that same director?
I've done it just once before with Spinal Tap.
Right.
Fred Willard in that movie. I connected him to A Mighty Wind.
I did, and I did it in that same episode with Best in Show.
Yeah. Well, in both
another
cases,
director that has like players.
Right. Yeah. You could do it with John Waters
Great
movies
point.
as well.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I
this
figured
is Honora.
Yeah, this is Honora. Yeah, the young woman from New York. Which I feel like at least one of us had to do the Sean Baker to Sean Baker pipeline here.
Sure. I love that.
Yeah.
Guys, are there any last things that we want to say about Tangerine?
One thing I've just been thinking about this whole time, I thought maybe like learning a little more about the movie might answer this. I feel like there should be something right in front of me, and yet I can't find an answer. Why is it called Tangerine?
Sean answered that in the Reddit AMA that they did. It's just the vibe.
Yeah.
I figured it probably was, because there are some other movies where, the title is, you can't really explain why it's a good title. It just is something like I mentioned Licorice Pizza earlier.
Yeah.
That's another one. I kind of think Blue Velvet is the same way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Although Blue Velvet has a real place in that movie.
It's true, but I think
it is evocative in a way that, I got you.
And Alexandra gives Rosmic an air freshener that's some kind of citrus.
True. Yeah. We don't know. Yeah, we can't see it clearly, but yeah. It's funny for me, like some listeners may remember this from a past mention, but I'll say it again for those who don't know that I am physically intolerant of citrus fruit.
Does that also apply to air fresheners?
Air fresheners, because it's artificial, I think I would find it unpleasant. Depending on how strong
dangerous.
It is. Maybe not dangerous. Depending on how pungent it is, I might want to leave the room, though.
Well, I'm glad that you're not allergic to this movie.
I'm certainly glad about that, too. Yeah.
Yeah, I will say I really enjoyed this. This was probably up there with probably some of the John Waters stuff for me in terms of revelations. I will definitely be coming back to this. I love that you brought up John Waters, because I was thinking a lot about that in that from what I know about Sean Baker and the films of his that I have seen and the bits of stuff that I have taken in, he's kind of rising the ranks for me as one of these filmmakers that I don't feel like I necessarily have to love everything that they do to just really appreciate that they exist, that they are there, that they're able to do their thing. And I really respect filmmakers like this that are interested in capturing stories that are very different from their own, but also being like a mensch about it. I think being very aware that there is like humanity in all of us, and that there's humanity that an audience is able to pick up on in small details. I think, Edo, you were very astute in bringing that up, that this movie gives you like flashes. I really like this. So thank you very much, Madeline, for this suggestion.
Of course.
And I think it goes to show the significance that this movie had in Sean Baker's filmography individually. That, I mean, it was kind of the movie when he became a cinephile household name.
Yeah.
And one little detail I'm just remembering now is that from this point onward, he uses the same font for all of his movie titles.
Right. Maybe a little Good Luck Charm type thing.
Totally.
Yeah, but Tangerine onward, it's the same font. I've noticed a lot of similarities in how he films title sequences in all of his movies.
Edo, how about you? I know this is your first time around with this movie. Any final thoughts?
I really enjoyed catching up with it. I think Florida Project is still my favorite of his films. I think it's the most fully imagined, let's say. But I really like this, and it sort of feels like a road not taken for him, in that he could have gone in a lot of different directions after this. You could have imagined different possibilities for what his later films would look like. And I think that the films now look more and more like very well made and good realist dramas. But what I like about Tangerine are its more surreal and poetic gestures, and those things are they've fallen a little by the wayside, those qualities. And I would love to see him
Tap
blend,
back into that?
to blend some of these effects into his canvas again, because it would just be nice to have moments that didn't feel like they were so locked into a narrative progression.
Yeah,
I think the moment that Julian, you referenced, where the guy rolls down the window and takes a picture of that sort of thing. Moments that are not just the action moving forward. I miss that. The scene in the church in Enora has all sorts of great ethnographic detail, but it's all kind of there just to set up the Karen Karagulian character, and then he's on his way.
Right.
It doesn't seem to exist as a world in and of itself anymore. And in Tangerine, it's almost as if the narrative is happening within this world, and the narrative itself, again, very thin. It's the world that it gives access to that is so exciting about the movie.
Yeah.
But by the time we get to Enora, it's the narrative that's most interesting, right? Most preoccupying. I mean, the scenes in Las Vegas are stimulating visually, but we've seen many scenes in Las Vegas that are kind of like that.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I respect where you're coming from on that.
100%.
Very cool.
Well, we'll see what follows Enora. Maybe it'll be more like Tangerine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe now he's got his Oscar.
Now he can zag again.
Yeah.
On that note, Edo, I really want to thank you for coming here and joining us. I know you came to this a little sight unseen. And
no worries. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Is there anything that you would like to tell our listeners about?
So if this is dropping on Christmas Eve, we have a lot of great Christmas programming. We're doing our kind of now quite traditional holiday lineup with movies like Carol and 2046 and McCabe and Mrs. Miller, things like that. But I'm actually really excited because we're doing this program on memory that I organized for November, December, and that's going to be continuing through the end of through the new year. Like the final films in it are going to screen like the weekend after New Year's.
Oh, cool.
And so, but on that Christmas weekend, Saturday the 27th, we're going to screen the entirety of Ho Xiaoshen's autobiography trilogy, Summer at Grandpa's, Time to Live and a Time to Die, and Dust in the Wind. And those are all great films, and we're going to screen them back to back. So I encourage you, dear listeners, to join us at Metrograph for Ho Xiaoshen's autobiography trilogy.
That sounds very fun.
That sounds really cool. I will be in town. So,
and Dust in the Wind and Time to Live and Time to Die are going to be on 35 millimeter.
Amazing.
Always love a good 35 millimeter print. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? I think Eat, Drink, Man, Woman.
That was on 35.
35 millimeter. Yeah.
We have a lot of good 35 millimeter playing right now as we're recording.
Yeah.
But
beginning of middle.
But the listeners will not care about this because they will be hearing about this weeks hence.
Yeah. What I would say though is I think it's safe to say at pretty much any time in the calendar year, Metrograph has got, like I said, at the top, impeccable taste on stuff. So you will not have to wait very long, I think, to find a great projection of a really interesting film. And I know that is something that Edo, you are intimately involved with. So I think all of us here at the table just want to say thank you, because that's a wonderful service, not just to cinephiles, but I think just to the city and the identity of New York as like a place that loves movies and champions revival theaters and things of that nature.
Absolutely.
Thank you, guys. I'm gratified. Thank you. Humbled, gratified. Yeah.
Of course. Well, the next time you hear from us, it's going to be 2026, and award season will be in full swing before you know it. we are going to explore a genre that we don't often find ourselves talking about, and we're going to go all in on them. That is romantic comedies, particularly ones that have either won or been nominated for Oscars. I'm very excited for this.
Same.
I am too. And the first one of this bunch, the one that we've all seen before, that we are going to discuss, is also going to be a milestone for us as a podcast because it will be the first film in the French language that we've covered. And that is what other than Amélie.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, very excited. I think we've got a really great slate of film selections for this cycle, and I think we're starting off very strong.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, I'm very excited to cover that movie. Jean-Pierre Jeunet. I've really enjoyed every one of the films of his that I've seen. And yeah, keep an eye out for that in the first week of January 2026.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
In addition to this podcast, you can follow us on TikTok and Instagram at Sleepless Cinematic Pod. You can contact us via email. We would love to hear from you. Write to us at sleeplesscinematicpod@gmail.com. If you're on Letterboxd, you can follow me, Madeline, at patronessofcats.
And you can follow me, Julian, at Julian_Barthold. If you're listening to us for the first time, thank you for finding us. If this is the 6th or 7th or even the 75th time you've listened to us, thank you so much for sticking with us. We've really grown to love doing this, and it means the world to have our budding listenership grow.
And if you haven't already, we'd ask you, return listener, to please write us a positive review and rate us on your podcast platform of choice. This is one of the best ways for new listeners to find us and help our podcast take its next steps. You can also keep it grassroots. You can tell a friend to tell a friend about the Sleepless Cinematic Podcast. That helps too.
Merry fucking Christmas.